They arrived on a Tuesday. No warnings, no transmissions, no diplomatic overtures. Just the sudden appearance of massive crystalline ships that shimmered like black diamonds against Earth's blue sky. 7 of them, each the size of a small city, positioning themselves over major population centers. New York, Beijing, Moscow, New Delhi, Sao Paulo, Cairo, and Sydney. For 18 hours, they simply hovered, silent and motionless, while Earth's governments scrambled, militaries mobilized, and civilians alternated between panic and awe. Social media exploded with theories, prayers, and final messages to loved ones. The stock market crashed. Religious leaders called for calm. Scientists attempted communication on every conceivable frequency. The Verdari, though humanity wouldn't learn their name until much later, responded with synchronized precision. At exactly 800 UTC, each ship released a pulse of emerald energy that disabled every electronic device within a 50-mile radius. Darkness fell over megalopolises as power grids failed. Planes dropped from the sky. Hospitals went dark. Communications ceased. Then the culling began. Commander Elena Reyes was flying her F-35 over the Nevada desert when it happened. One moment she was leading a squadron toward the California coastline, where one of the smaller alien vessels had been spotted. The next, her instruments went dead, the engine stalled, and she was gliding through empty air. "Mayday, mayday," she shouted into her useless radio as the fighter jet began its fatal descent. Years of training kicked in. She pulled the ejection handle and felt the violent jerk as the canopy blew off, followed by the rocket-powered seat launching her into the open sky. As her parachute deployed, Elena watched her $80 million aircraft crash into the desert below. Looking around, she saw 4 more parachutes, the rest of her squadron. 2 were missing. A lump formed in her throat as she realized they must not have ejected in time. 3 days later, Elena stood in what remained of Nori's alternate command center, a repurposed mine shaft deep within the Rocky Mountains. The underground facility, shielded by hundreds of feet of solid rock and designed to withstand nuclear blasts, had been minimally affected by the alien EMP weapons. The room was crowded with military personnel, government officials, and a handful of scientists who had managed to reach the facility. The atmosphere was tense, the air thick with fear and determination. General Marcus Williams, a stern-faced man with salt and pepper hair and a permanent scowl, addressed the room. "The death toll is estimated at 12 million globally. Major cities have been hit hardest. The aliens," he hesitated on the word, as if still uncomfortable with its reality, "have deployed ground forces in the form of automated drones. They're methodically securing strategic locations and resources. We've lost contact with most of Europe and Asia." "What about nuclear options?" asked a pale-faced senator. "We tried," the general replied grimly. "The Russians launched 2 ICBMs at the Moscow ship. Both detonated prematurely, miles away from the target. Same with our submarine-launched warheads in the Pacific. These things have some kind of defense system that detects and neutralizes incoming threats." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. Humanity's most powerful weapons were useless. Dr. Aisha Patel, a quantum physicist from MIT who had been hiking in Colorado when the attack began, stepped forward. "General, I've been analyzing the data from our remaining satellites. These ships are emitting a specific radiation signature unlike anything we've seen before. It suggests they're using some form of quantum entanglement for both propulsion and their weapon systems." "And that helps us how exactly?" Williams asked. "Quantum systems are notoriously fragile," Patel explained. "They require perfect conditions to maintain coherence. If we could disrupt that coherence somehow." For the first time since the invasion began, Elena felt a flicker of hope. Over the next 2 weeks, as the alien forces, now identified as the Verdari through fragmented communications intercepted by surviving radio astronomers, continued their systematic takeover of Earth, a desperate plan was formed. Project Thunderstrike, they called it. a last-ditch effort to fight back against an enemy with technology centuries beyond human capability. The plan hinged on Dr. Patel's theory that the Verdari ships maintained quantum coherence through a network of synchronized field generators. Operating from a series of hidden bunkers, survivors with scientific and technical backgrounds worked around the clock, repurposing existing technology to create devices capable of generating targeted electromagnetic pulses on specific frequencies that Dr. Patel believed would disrupt the Verdari quantum systems. Elena found herself working alongside Dr. Patel and a former Silicon Valley engineer named Marcus Zhang, whose expertise in electrical systems proved invaluable. They formed an unlikely team: a fighter pilot, a physicist, and a tech entrepreneur, united by the sole purpose of saving what remained of humanity. The key is synchronization, Dr. Patel explained, sketching diagrams on a whiteboard in their makeshift lab. We need to hit all 7 motherships simultaneously with precisely calibrated pulses. Miss the timing by even a millisecond, and the Verdari systems will compensate. And how exactly do we deliver these pulses? Elena asked, examining the prototype device, a jumble of repurposed electronics that looked nothing like a weapon of war. Marcus Zhang smiled for the first time in days. That's where your expertise comes in, Commander. The plan was audacious, bordering on suicidal. Teams would infiltrate areas near each mothership, positioning the disruptors within range. Each team would include at least one pilot capable of operating the handful of military aircraft that had been protected from the initial EMP blasts by being in hardened hangars or underground facilities. Elena was assigned to lead the North American team targeting the ship hovering over the ruins of Los Angeles. Their disruptor was loaded onto a modified C-130 transport plane, one of the few aircraft still operational after being stored in an EMP-shielded hangar at a remote Air Force base. 2 months after the initial invasion, with more than a quarter of Earth's population dead or missing, and Verdari control extending across nearly 60% of the planet's surface, Operation Thunderstrike was ready. Elena sat in the cockpit of the C-130, running through pre-flight checks by flashlight. Beside her, a young Air Force lieutenant named Rodriguez monitored the disruptor equipment secured in the cargo hold. In the back of the plane, a team of 8 soldiers prepared for the ground phase of the mission. If the aerial deployment failed, they would attempt to position the backup disruptor manually. "All teams report ready," came General Williams' voice over the secure radio channel, a low-power analog system specifically designed to avoid Verdari detection. "Synchronize watches. Launch in T-30 minutes." Elena took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart. The plan was bold, desperate, and relied on theoretical physics that even Dr. Patel admitted was speculative at best. But it was all they had. "Remember," Dr. Patel had told her during their final briefing, "you need to get within 5 kilometers of the ship's central axis for the disruptor to be effective. Any further, and the pulse will be too weak." 5 kilometers meant flying directly under the massive alien vessel, a vessel that had weapons capable of vaporizing entire city blocks in seconds. As Elena started the aircraft's engines, she thought of her parents in Arizona. She hadn't heard from them since the invasion. Were they still alive? Had they been taken by the Verdari? The uncertainty gnawed at her, but she pushed it aside. Focus on the mission. That's all that matters now. The C-130 lumbered down the runway, gaining speed slowly. Elena's hands were steady on the controls, but her mouth was dry. This was it, humanity's last, best hope. As they lifted off into the night sky, Elena could see the glow of the Verdari ship in the distance, hovering over the ruins of what had once been one of America's greatest cities. Its crystalline surface reflected moonlight, giving it an almost ethereal beauty, despite the destruction it had wrought. "All aircraft are airborne," came Williams' voice again. "T-20 minutes to synchronize deployment. Godspeed and good hunting." Elena adjusted their course, flying low to avoid detection. The plan was to approach from different angles, maximizing the chances that at least some of the teams would reach their targets. Disruptor charging at 60%, Rodriguez reported, his voice tense but controlled. All systems nominal. The city ruins passed beneath them, dark and silent. Occasionally, Elena spotted the telltale emerald glow of Verdari ground drones patrolling the streets. One looked up as they passed overhead, but the C-130's modified engines, designed to minimize electromagnetic signatures, seemed to prevent detection. 15 kilometers from target, Elena announced, her voice steadier than she felt. Beginning final approach. The massive alien vessel filled the windscreen now, blotting out the stars. Its surface was not smooth as it had appeared from a distance, but covered in intricate patterns that seemed to shift and change as they watched. 10 kilometers, Elena said, descending further. They were flying at rooftop level now, weaving between the skeletal remains of skyscrapers. Disruptor status. Charged at 95% and rising, Rodriguez replied. We're cutting it close, Commander. 7 kilometers, Elena continued, sweat beading on her forehead despite the cool air in the cockpit. Visual confirmation of target point. The underbelly of the Verdari ship was different from its upper surface, a complex arrangement of what appeared to be energy emitters and sensor arrays surrounding a central hub that glowed with an intense blue-white light. That's it, Elena said, pointing. The central axis, 5 kilometers to optimal deployment range. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the cockpit. We've been spotted, Rodriguez shouted. Verdari interceptors launching. Elena caught sight of smaller craft detaching from the mothership, sleek, dart-like vessels that moved with impossible speed. All teams, we have enemy contact, she broadcast, moving to immediate deployment. Negative, Command. General Williams' voice came through, breaking up with static. Maintain synchronization. Critical 4. The rest of his message was lost as a beam of emerald energy lanced past the C-130, missing by mere meters. We won't make it to the deployment point, Elena realized. Rodriguez, what's our disruptor status? 99% charge, but we're still at 6.2 kilometers, outside optimal range. Elena made a split-second decision. We'll have to get closer. Hang on. She pushed the throttle forward, sending the aging transport plane into a steep dive directly toward the central hub of the alien vessel. The C-130 shuddered, never designed for such maneuvers. Commander, what are you doing? Rodriguez shouted. Getting us in range, Elena replied through gritted teeth. The alien interceptors were closing fast, but she had one advantage. They clearly weren't expecting a direct suicide run at their mothership. 5.5 kilometers, Rodriguez called out, clinging to his seat. 5.3. Energy beams crisscrossed around them, the Verdari weapons trying to track their erratic flight path. Disruptor at 100%. 5 kilometers. We're in range. All teams, deploying now. Elena broadcast. Repeat, North American team deploying. Rodriguez slammed his hand down on the activation switch. The disruptor hummed to life in the cargo hold, emitting a pulse of energy specifically tuned to the frequency Dr. Patel had calculated. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Elena noticed something strange. The patterns on the Verdari ship's surface stopped shifting. The blue-white glow of the central hub flickered. It's working, Rodriguez exclaimed. The quantum field is destabilizing. Elena banked hard, pulling away from the ship as the first visible effects of the disruptor became apparent. Cracks of golden light appeared across the crystalline surface, spreading like lightning. All teams report successful deployment, came Williams' broken transmission. Confirmed effects on all 7 targets. As the C-130 sped away from the alien vessel, Elena risked a glance back and witnessed something she would never forget. The massive Verdari ship was breaking apart, not in an explosion, but in a cascade of disintegration, as if the very atoms that composed it were losing cohesion. It collapsed inward, a silent implosion that seemed to bend light itself, before vanishing in a final flash of radiance. Where the mighty alien warship had been, only dust remained, sparkling in the moonlight as it drifted down over the ruined city. "Command, this is Thunderstrike 1. Elena reported, her voice barely above a whisper. "Target neutralized." "Repeat, target neutralized." Similar reports flooded in from around the globe. All 7 Verdari motherships had been destroyed simultaneously, their quantum fields disrupted beyond recovery. But the battle for Earth was far from over. The ground forces remained, now cut off from their command ships, but no less deadly. And questions loomed. Why had the Verdari come? Were there more of them out there? How would humanity rebuild from such devastation? As Elena guided the damaged C-130 back toward their hidden base, these questions swirled in her mind. But for now, one thing was certain. Humanity had fought back against impossible odds. They had proven that even faced with superior technology and overwhelming force, the human spirit would not be broken. The Verdari had been certain of victory. They had not counted on human ingenuity, determination, and the fierce will to survive. And as the sun rose over a forever changed Earth, the real fight to reclaim their world was just beginning. 3 months after Operation Thunderstrike's success, humanity found itself in a strange new reality. The destruction of the 7 Verdari motherships had been a pivotal victory, but Earth was far from saved. Automated Verdari ground forces, now operating independently without central command, continued their assault on what remained of human civilization. Elena Reyes stood at the window of the reproposed office building that served as headquarters for the North American Defense Coalition. Below, the streets of what had once been Denver teemed with refugees and military personnel. The city had been spared the worst of the invasion due to its relative isolation and lack of strategic importance to the aliens. "Commander Reyes," a voice called from behind her. "The Council is ready for your report." Elena turned to face Captain Dawson, a former Army Ranger whose face bore the scars of close combat with Verdari drones. "Thank you, Captain. I'll be right there." The council chamber, formerly a corporate boardroom, was filled with the various leaders who had emerged in the aftermath of the invasion. Military officers sat alongside civilian scientists, elected officials who had survived, and those with essential skills who had risen to prominence in the crisis. General Williams nodded as she entered. Despite their victory, he looked older, the weight of command etched deeper into his face. "Commander Reyes," he acknowledged, "please brief us on the status of Project Javelin." Elena activated the holographic display at the center of the table, one of the few advanced technologies they'd managed to restore since the Verdari EMP attacks. "Project Javelin has reached Phase 2, she began, showing images of captured Verdari technology. Dr. Patel and Mr. Zhang have successfully reverse-engineered key components from disabled enemy drones. We now understand the basic principles of their weapons systems and have begun adapting them for our use." The display shifted to show a modified human fighter jet equipped with salvaged alien technology. "This prototype combines our F-22 airframe with Verdari energy weapons. Initial tests show 300% increased combat effectiveness against enemy ground forces. How many of these can we produce?" asked a stern-faced woman Elena recognized as the former governor of Colorado. "With current resources, 2 per week," Elena replied. "But each drone we neutralize provides additional components to accelerate production." Dr. Aisha Patel stepped forward, her once immaculate appearance now replaced by practical clothing and eyes that reflected both exhaustion and fierce determination. "The real breakthrough," she said, "is in communication disruption. The Verdari ground forces operate on a decentralized network, but they still require coordination. We've developed a signal that can temporarily blind their sensors and disrupt their tactical algorithms." Marcus Zhang, now sporting a beard and looking nothing like the polished tech executive he'd once been, added, "It's like giving them a seizure. 10 seconds of confusion. enough time for our forces to gain a critical advantage in combat. For the next hour, the Council discussed deployment strategies, resource allocation, and the status of similar efforts across the globe. Communication between continents remained limited, but they knew from sporadic reports that resistance forces in Asia, Europe, and South America were making similar advances. After the meeting, Alina found herself alone with Dr. Patel in the makeshift lab that occupied what had once been the building's cafeteria. "You didn't mention the Nexus disruptor," Alina said quietly, glancing at the device taking shape in the corner of the room, a larger, more complex version of the quantum disruptors they used against the motherships. Patel's expression darkened. "It's not ready. The power requirements are enormous, and we're still not sure about the potential side effects. But it could end this. Take out all the remaining Verdari forces at once." "In theory," Patel admitted. "But Alina, this technology is pushing boundaries we barely understand. The quantum disruption field could affect more than just Verdari tech. There could be ripples." "What kind of ripples?" "The kind that might attract attention we don't want," Patel said cryptically. "The universe is a big place. The Verdari might not be the only ones watching." Before Alina could press further, alarms blared throughout the building. Red emergency lights bathed the lab in crimson. "Perimeter breach," came a voice over the intercom. "All combat personnel to defensive positions. Civilian staff to secure areas immediately." Alina and Patel exchanged a look of grim determination. "We'll continue this discussion later," Alina said, already moving toward the door. "If there is a later," Patel replied softly. The attack was the largest they'd seen since the destruction of the motherships. Hundreds of Verdari combat drones, sleek, obsidian machines that moved with insect-like precision, had converged on Denver from multiple directions, overwhelming outlying defense posts. Alina joined a squadron of pilots rushing to the underground hangar where their aircraft, a mix of surviving military jets and modified civilian planes, waited. Within minutes, she was airborne in one of the prototype fighters equipped with Verdari weapons technology. From above, the battle looked apocalyptic. Streams of emerald energy crisscrossed with human tracer fire and explosions. The Verdari moved in perfect formation, their tactics clearly adaptive and learning from previous encounters. "All wings, engage scrambler frequency," Alina ordered through her headset. "Deploy on my mark in Quadrant 4. The scrambler, Zhang and Patel's disruption signal, was their ace. It couldn't be used too often or the Verdari would adapt, but at critical moments, it gave human forces a fighting chance. 3, 2, 1, mark. Alina activated the system. For a breathtaking moment, the alien forces below stuttered in their advance, movements becoming erratic and disorganized. "Now," she commanded, diving toward the largest concentration of enemy units. The adapted Verdari weapons on her fighter came to life, streaming destructive energy that cut through the confused alien drones with devastating effect. Around her, other aircraft followed suit, exploiting the momentary advantage. For 20 crucial minutes, the battle swung in humanity's favor. Then, without warning, the Verdari tactics shifted. The remaining drones began emitting a high-frequency pulse that interfered with the human aircraft systems. "They're adapting," Alina shouted into her comms. "Fall back to secondary positions." Her controls grew sluggish as the alien countermeasure affected her fighter's electronics. Warning lights flashed across her console. A massive explosion rocked the ground below as one of the defense perimeter's weapon emplacements was destroyed. Through the smoke, Alina saw a new wave of Verdari units advancing, larger, more heavily armored, and equipped with weapons she hadn't seen before. "Command, this is Reyes," she reported, voice tense. "We have new Verdari units on the field. Repeat, new configuration, heavily armed. Our current tactics are ineffective." General Williams' response was grim. "All units, fall back to the inner perimeter. Civilian evacuation protocols are now in effect." Alina's heart sank. They were losing Denver. As she banked her fighter away from the advancing enemy forces, a desperate plan formed in her mind. Dr. Patel, she called over a secure channel. The Nexus disruptor, is it operational at all? Even partially? There was a long pause before Patel's voice came through, tight with tension. Theoretically, we've completed the core assembly. But Alina, it's untested, unstable. The power source alone could melt down if. Can it be moved? Another pause. Yes. It's mounted on the mobile platform we salvaged from that military transport. But, get it ready. Alina interrupted. I'm coming in. 20 minutes later, Alina stood in the lab as Marcus Zhang made final adjustments to what looked like a larger, more menacing version of the quantum disruptors they used against the motherships. The device hummed ominously, arcs of blue electricity occasionally dancing across its surface. This is insane, Zhang muttered, not looking up from his work. The field tests show a disruption radius of approximately 2 kilometers, but the effect on non-Verdari technology is unpredictable. It could fry every electronic device in the area, including our own. Do we have a choice? Alina asked. General Williams and Dr. Patel exchanged grim looks. The evacuation will take at least 3 hours, Williams said. At the current rate of Verdari advance, we have less than 1. Then we need to buy time, Alina said firmly. I'll take the disruptor to the eastern perimeter. That's where their forces are most concentrated. If it works. If it works, you'll destroy a significant portion of their attack force, Patel finished. And if it doesn't, or if the radius is larger than predicted, then I won't be around to worry about it, Alina said with a grim smile. Despite protests, the plan was approved. With no better options and time running out, the Nexus disruptor was loaded onto a modified military transport vehicle. Alina would drive it to the designated position, a highway overpass that provided both elevation and a clear line of sight to the advancing Verdari force. As she prepared to leave, Dr. Patel handed her a small device. Remote activator, she explained. It should give you about 30 seconds to clear the area after triggering the countdown. Should. Alina raised an eyebrow. Like I said. Untested, Patel replied with a weak smile. Then, unexpectedly, she embraced Alina. Come back, Commander. That's an order. Alina returned the hug briefly before climbing into the transport vehicle. No promises, Doctor. Just make sure those civilians get out. The journey to the eastern perimeter was a nightmare of navigating through battle-scarred streets. Twice, Alina had to detour around Verdari patrols, the massive device in the back of the vehicle humming with increasing intensity, as if sensing the proximity of its targets. When she reached the overpass, the situation was even worse than reported. The Verdari had broken through the outer defenses completely. Their new, larger units were methodically dismantling human resistance, while swarms of smaller drones secured captured territory. Alina positioned the vehicle at the highest point of the overpass, then activated the final arming sequence for the Nexus disruptor. The device's hum became a deep, resonant thrum that she could feel in her bones. Command, this is Reyes, she reported. Disruptor in position. Beginning final countdown. Understood, Commander, Williams replied, his voice solemn. All remaining forces are pulling back beyond the calculated radius. Godspeed. Alina activated the remote trigger, starting the 30-second countdown. She took one last look at the device, humanity's desperate gamble, then ran for the emergency vehicle they'd stashed a half-kilometer away as an escape route. She was halfway there when she heard the whine of Verdari drones approaching. 3 of the smaller units appeared around a corner, their sensors immediately locking onto her running figure. Energy weapons charged with an ominous green glow. Alina drew her sidearm, useless against their armor, but she wouldn't go down without a fight. Just as the first drone fired, a barrage of conventional gunfire tore into it from the side. The drone staggered, its shot going wide. Captain Dawson emerged from cover, a heavy machine gun in his hands. Thought you could use some backup, Commander. Together, They held off the drones long enough to reach the escape vehicle, a civilian SUV modified with salvaged armor plating. Dawson took the wheel while Alina kept firing out the window. 10 seconds to detonation, she warned, checking the remote trigger's display. Floor it. The SUV's engine roared as Dawson pushed it to its limits, racing away from the overpass. In the rearview mirror, Alina could see more Verdari units converging on the Nexus disruptor, perhaps sensing the danger it posed. 5, 4, 3. She counted down. Brace, Dawson shouted, swerving behind a concrete barrier for additional protection. When the disruptor activated, there was no explosive blast, just a sudden, perfect silence, followed by a wave of distortion that rippled through the air like heat haze. Everything electronic in its path simply stopped. Verdari units froze mid-motion, then collapsed as if their animating force had been suddenly removed. The effect spread in a perfect circle from the overpass, encompassing a radius that seemed much larger than the predicted 2 kilometers. Alina and Dawson's vehicle died instantly, as did their communications equipment, and even Alina's digital watch. Did it work? Dawson asked, squinting through the dusty windshield at the strange stillness that had fallen over the battlefield. Alina opened the door and stepped out, surveying the scene with cautious optimism. Where there had been chaos and destruction moments before, now there was only silence. Hundreds of Verdari units lay dormant, some split apart as if their very molecular structure had been compromised. "I think it did more than work," she said quietly. "I think it." Her words were cut off by a sound unlike anything she'd ever heard, a deep, resonant tone that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The air above the center of the destruction field began to shimmer, forming what looked like a tear in reality itself. "What the hell is that?" Dawson whispered, reaching for his weapon instinctively. Before Alina could respond, a beam of intense white light shot from the tier, striking the ground where the Nexus disruptor had been. When it faded, a figure stood there, humanoid but clearly not human, with silvery skin and eyes that shimmered with an inner light. "You have used forbidden technology," the being spoke, its voice resonating directly in their minds rather than through the air. "Technology beyond your developmental stage." Alina stepped forward, placing herself between the entity and Dawson. "We did what was necessary to survive. The Verdari gave us no choice." The being tilted its head, studying her with those unsettling, luminescent eyes. "The Verdari are a pest species, quarantined to their home sector for their aggression. Their presence here was unexpected. Quarantined." Alina repeated, struggling to process the implications. "There are others out there who know about them, who control them." "There are many civilizations in this galaxy," the being replied. "Some ancient beyond your comprehension. Some, like yours, still taking their first steps." The entity moved forward, examining a fallen Verdari drone with apparent distaste. "The Verdari escaped their boundaries. This will be addressed. But you," it turned back to Alina, "you have created a quantum disruption technology that sent ripples through subspace. Such technology is restricted." "We were fighting for our survival," Alina said firmly, refusing to back down despite the overwhelming sense of power emanating from the being. "We'll use whatever means necessary to protect our world." For a long moment, the entity was silent, its gaze seeming to look through Alina rather than at her. Finally, it spoke again. "Your species is interesting, primitive, yet innovative, violent, yet capable of remarkable adaptation." It gestured, and the tear in space widened. "The Galactic Concord will be watching Earth more closely now. Your use of quantum manipulation has drawn attention, not all of it benevolent." "Are you threatening us?" Dawson asked, stepping up beside Alina. The being made a sound that might have been laughter. "No. Warning you. The universe is vast and filled with wonders and horrors alike. You have announced your presence quite dramatically." Before either human could respond, the entity began to fade. The remaining Verdari forces on your world will deactivate within one planetary rotation. Consider it a gesture of acknowledgement. Your species has potential, if you survive long enough to realize it. With those cryptic words, the beam vanished, the tear in space closing behind it. For several moments, Alina and Dawson stood in stunned silence, staring at the empty space where the alien had been. Finally, Dawson spoke. "So, did we just meet a god, or what?" Alina shook her head slowly. "Not a god. Just someone so far ahead of us technologically that it might as well be magic." She looked out at the battlefield, at the fallen Verdari units. "But they know we're here now. Whatever they are." "Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" Dawson asked. "I don't know," Alina admitted. "But we're still here. Earth is still here. And now we know we're not alone." She turned to face him, a new determination in her eyes. "We need to prepare, build, learn, because something tells me this was just the beginning." As they made their way back toward the city, where the evacuation had likely been completed by now, Alina couldn't help but look up at the stars beginning to appear in the early evening sky. They seemed different somehow, closer, more immediate. The universe had suddenly become much larger and much smaller all at once. Humanity had survived its first contact with an advanced alien species, barely, but in doing so, had announced its presence to powers beyond imagination. The Verdari had come to conquer Earth, certain of their victory against a primitive species. Instead, they had found a humanity that refused to surrender, that would innovate, adapt, and fight back with incredible determination. In the months and years that followed, Earth would rebuild. The remaining Verdari technology would be studied, understood, and incorporated into human science, advancing technological development by decades in a single year. Global cooperation, born from shared trauma and necessity, would replace old national rivalries. And in secret facilities around the world, new defenses would be constructed, new ships designed, new weapons developed, all in preparation for whatever might come next from the stars. Because Alina Reyes and every other survivor knew one undeniable truth: Earth was no longer alone, no longer hidden. They had revealed themselves to the cosmos, for better or worse. The next visitors might not be so easily defeated. But whatever came, humanity would be ready. They had faced extinction and emerged victorious. They had turned alien certainty to dust. And in the vastness of space, word was spreading about the small blue planet that had defeated the Verdari, and about the unpredictable, resourceful, dangerous species that called it home.